Text your dirty tax secrets to Tatiana. Don't worry, she won't tell anyone. Everyone's got 'em, right? Tatiana Sawyer is a tax and business strategist, CPA, and MBA who makes your life less taxing. She helps to reduce your taxes legally so that you make and keep more of your money. Get her second opinion discovery without leaving your current accountant. She'll identify missed opportunities and recommend a cure. Visit TatianaSawyer.com to learn more.
Welcome back, besties.
Are we rolling?
We are rolling.
Listen, I cannot help it. I have been absolutely exhausted. And I kept telling Kelsey, I was like, what if I have mono or something? But I kind of go through this. And do you know where I'm going with this?
No,
Okay.
I'm just going to roll with this.
Okay. So I'm sitting upstairs in my office earlier, and I realized that the thing for me that I have to have in order to focus and actually get anything accomplished is I have to have AirPods or some kind of like sound something in, whether it's those headphones or AirPods or whatever. And I have to have music playing. So I turned on my AirPods and I was like working, and I was getting so much done. And I like switched into this. Okay, now I'm ready for this week. Like we have Meet You in Kentucky this week, and we always get wild on the farewell night. And so Casey is ready. And anyway, when you said something, or I said rolling, all I could think of is that song, like See Me Roll.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, I got to practice my dance moves before Friday, or I'm going to look like an idiot in this club that we're taking everybody to.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's been listen, we don't get out much. It's been a long time, so I'm ready.
You ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll in.
Okay. You going to introduce our guest?
Yes,
so that we can talk.
Sorry, listen, it's
perfect.
It's been rough. Dr. Tara, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about the book that you wrote back in 2019, and we'll just kind of dive in straight from there.
Hi, I'm Casey, and right here beside me is Kelsey. We are licensed professional counselors, mothers, entrepreneurs, and besties. We know firsthand what it's like to wake up one day and think, how in the heck did I wind up here?
Through our own journeys of self-discovery, we found that joy is something that has to be pursued through internal work. Now we are on a mission to help women from all walks of life understand themselves more so they can have real lasting joy.
Join us every Thursday to hear fun and insightful interviews with experts who can point you toward self-discovery and fulfillment.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tara Sanderson. I'm a licensed psychologist in Oregon. I run a small group practice with multidisciplinary staff who help people with anxiety and a lot of other types of mental health issues. I wrote a book in 2019 called Too Much, Not Enough, a guide to decreasing anxiety and perfectionism by intentional living. And one of the reasons I wanted to be on this show was because I read Casey's book, In Search of You, and had an epiphany little moment that happened after COVID and after all of the drama that we have gone through in the last 4 years, and realized that so many of the tools in that book are awesome, but I wrote it at a place where I thought I had a lot of answers. And over the last 5 years or 4 years, I feel like we have figured out so that we didn't have a lot of answers about almost anything, and have a lot of us been really shaken down to our cores of what really matters and what's important and how we can live authentically and be safe for other people and be safe for ourselves in that process. So this year I am going to re-release my book at some point. I don't know quite when because it's in process, but of just kind of editing some spaces where I gave this very rigid response that totally reflects my perfectionism tendencies with a much more fluid, authentic response of who I am now, and really kind of make this more of a long going journey of this element of learning who I am in that space of not being too much and not feeling like I'm not enough.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have so many things to say. Should I ask the serious question first or the really serious question first?
Ooh.
Let's go hard and fast deep. Let's do it. So the really serious question.
Okay. The really serious question is, do perfectionists like to dance?
Oh, that's such a good question. I love to dance.
You do?
I love to dance. I do. out there on the dance floor and just releasing a lot of that like tension and pent up energy is so, so amazing to me. I'm having this vision of a memory where I went to a friend's wedding in Jamaica, and all of these wonderful Jamaican people were playing music and dancing, and I was out there dancing with them. And this old gentleman, I think he was in his 70s, he ran a little shop like 2 doors down, was just like, "Oh, your moves, you move with your spirit." And I was like, "You bet I do." And I have this rhythm and this music. I loved it. So I don't know if all perfectionists do, but I sure do.
Okay.
That's where you were going with the beginning of the conversation, right?
Maybe.
I totally think you were.
I'm a little bit more intentional than I like to let on. Well, the second thing I was going to say is that, of course, a perfectionist re-releases a book. I'm assuming that you've let go of some of maybe the unhealthy perfectionism tendencies, or you've helped other people and then now you're like, okay. Well, you mentioned you have a new you or a new self, but what's changed?
I think one of the biggest things that changed was really understanding how much of the roots of perfectionism came from white supremacy and racism, and recognizing that like I never would want to be aligned in that space. And so this idea that there is a full on right or wrong in so many categories, that I took that into things even as simple as like, this is the right brand of cereal to the wrong brand of cereal, right? Like I took this principle and applied it to the most minute things in my life in order to give me safety. And none of that actually gave me safety. It kept me living in fear. And tying that all back into white supremacy and racism, I realized like, oh, this rigidity is not doing what I thought it was doing. And I need to live in a much more fluid format in that way. And I could do a lot of that for my clients in the office, but it was so hard for me to do that for myself. I kept thinking like, if I can just find the right way to do this or the perfect way to follow this plan, or if I can just be known as doing things the right way, then everything will be fine. But I was still looking over my shoulder as if somebody was going to come find out that I was doing it all wrong all along.
This reminds me of Casey's book in a lot of ways. And the epiphany that she had is like, she's keeping the thing that she's running from, she's keeping the closest to her, right? In that rigidity and stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I mean, yeah, I think I don't even know how to frame. So I grew up in a really weird dynamic of a household, which you read the book, so you can kind of piece together. One person, I didn't really talk about my siblings any in the book, very little, but I have a brother who's 14 years older than me and a sister who's 13 years older than me that I have not spoken to in 7 years or so. But she, in my mind, was always the perfectionist. Like everything had to be perfect. And I'm talking like scissors, laying down on the driveway, cutting the grass to the same height as the driveway with scissors. Perfectionist. I remember like going into her house and I was not allowed to touch a wall, and you don't even think about touching walls in someone's house until they tell you not to touch the wall. Like you feel like you have to touch the wall to get down the hallway, I don't know. It was just insane. And so I grew up seeing that. And for me, I guess that was kind of a blessing because I was able to say, oh my, like that is not what I want to be. I cannot. The amount of stress and anxiety that was like a looming cloud over her, you could see it from miles and miles away.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still think you're kind of perfectionistic in some ways.
In what ways?
Now, obviously not touching walls at home. You probably walk through just going.
I'm like my kids. We're just like this as we go down the hall.
But I feel like when you have a vision, like you have a project, you are going to see it through in every single detail. And, which is a huge component of who you are. But like sometimes it's like, I need this plant to be watered this way.
Yeah. Or it'll die.
Yeah. See?
Dr. Tara, do you think that perfectionism is a trauma response?
I would liken it to a fear response. And so therefore, yes, definitely from trauma as well. I think that a lot of times when I look into the histories of the people that I've worked with and helped or people who've responded to my book, a lot of them have had singular moments or a lot of singular moments where something impacted them so greatly of something they had done wrong, whether they were so embarrassed by it or others commented on it or a parent was harsh about it or a teacher or someone in their world, that they kind of internally vowed, I'm never going to do that again. And then it becomes this striving to never have that kind of an experience happen again. And they're so afraid of it happening that they push themselves further and further and further down the perfectionistic trail, whether it's in that same category or in all categories. And it makes life so hard and so difficult.
Quit looking at me.
Well, I just wonder where you're going to go with this, because I think I know.
Well, go ahead. Tell me, Miss Mind Reader.
Nope.
No, I was just thinking of just that all or nothing mentality. You know, like some people can very much... okay, I'm just going to go out on a limb. Is your client care team spending too much time on admin tasks, chasing paperwork, and billing? Are you worried that hiring more therapists will only overload your client care team while they're also managing a long wait list? If you're nodding along, it's time for a customer relationship management system, aka a CRM. But not just any CRM. You need a clinical CRM, like the one we just started using at MindSight. Practice Access is the first HIPAA-compliant CRM specifically designed for growing group therapy practices. If you're ready to ditch the intake, Google Sheet of Doom, and finally get the data you need to scale your practice, visit practiceaccess.com and sign up for a demo to learn more about how you can save your intake team 10 hours per week. That's practiceaccess.com and mention MindSight for 20% off your first 2 months. I think some people are born with tendencies to think that way, to tendencies to be extreme, you know, all or nothing. We have 2 kids at home that I think are pretty, you know, it's all this or all that. That's not, I can't, for mine anyway, it's not learned completely because, you know, I raised her and I know how I raised her. So I know that that's not what you...
No, you're trying to divert whatever I have on my mind, which is fine.
Go ahead. What did you think I was going to say?
I was just thinking about like certain situations that have made you, like when I was saying, you know, I think when you have something in your head, you see it through and you into all the details and everything, you want it to be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that comes from a place, just like she's saying, of like little moments, like right when you started your business, right? And in your first book, you talked about people taking over. What was that? Like a pirate ship, pirates,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like those pirates probably altered you in some way, shape, or form. That when you're doing something in the business realm, you're gonna see it to its fullest and make sure that everything's done with perfection, so that doesn't happen.
So how do you know when your perfectionistic tendencies are unhealthy?
Ooh, that's a good question.
That is a really good question. For me, I feel a tightness in my shoulders. And when I get to that rigid place of like, there are no other options. This is the only option. And I can just feel my shoulders like tighten up and be like, and we are locked in. Almost like you're getting ready on like a roller coaster ride or something like, shoo, this is the only thing that is going to happen right now. And you're just locked into that space. I don't know how other people experience it, but that's mine, is I can tell when I'm getting to that rigid place because I just kind of like lock in. And that's the uncomfortable part. Like there's something different when I'm talking to an employee about doing a mandatory reporting call. And I'm looking at them and being like, literally, this is the only option. Like you can't not call, babe. I don't feel that locked in this in my shoulders. That's just how it is, versus the person saying, hey, could we try it this way? And I'm like, nope. Yeah. Nope, we cannot. And I can just feel my whole body like zoom in and be like, nope, this is the only way we can do it. I can't try it your way because I won't like it or it's not right or whatever those perfectionistic tendencies are.
So maybe it's a little bit of when you feel like...
Well, body awareness. Like, what is your body telling you in the moment?
Yeah. But I was thinking, so there's things in my world that I can be more perfectionistic about, like what you're saying. So if I want to take the pottery studio and make a bar, I will not act on that decision until I can see a fully finished bar in my head. And then once I can see it, then I do it. Okay, so that's a choice. You know, I choose to put a bar, I choose to do all of that. You know, that's a choice. Do I feel compelled? No. It's something I have control over. It's something that I can say, yes, I'm going to be perfectionistic about this right here, and this is why, but it doesn't necessarily carry into all other areas of life. So it's almost like it's a choice for me. When it's not a choice, that's the problem. Like when it's happening, when it feels like it's happening to me and I have no control over it.
Yeah.
That would be unhealthy. Why are you looking at me like I'm stupid?
I'm not looking at you like you're stupid. I am just looking at you because you're talking.
Oh.
You want me to? I'll look this way so I can see you.
Let's not look at each other. Anyway, does that make sense? You know, when people...
It does. It does. That piece of freedom versus being controlled, I think is really resonant to the perfectionist experience too. I think that whether or not we think we're seeking freedom by controlling all the aspects to get the outcome that we want, or by this idea of like when you feel it, if it feels like something is controlling you or you don't have an option, that causes some of that rigidity. I think freedom is my word of the year this year, of like the thing that I'm striving for is how do I get some of that freedom feeling, like when I'm dancing. I feel totally different when I'm dancing. There is no right or wrong. It is an absolutely free moment versus the rest of my world where I end up being a lot more rigid.
What are some of those components of your book that you're changing up? Like, where were you rigid in your book that you have had some growth?
There are 2 sections where I talked a lot about kind of the right way to be a wife and the right way to make decisions. I use a tool in my book called the sober practice, where part of the sober practice is that you come up with 5 options of how you solve a problem. 2 of them need to be really extreme. 3 of them are kind of in the middle, so that you give yourself kind of the parameters of the spectrum of how you can make that decision. And then whichever decision you decide, you have to do a weighing test. So you decide, is it something that you can do non-judgmentally, fully present, and on purpose? And if whichever one of the decisions you want to choose, you can do it with those 3 pieces being all yeses, then go for it. Which I love the sober method. I think it helps a lot of people with anxiety. It helps a lot of people with perfectionism. It helps a lot of people in a lot of ways, but there's still some rigidity in there of like, all 3 must be yeses. There's no option for it to not, for there to be some flexibility in there for that intentional choice component. And I do think you can make intentional choices now, having looked at how the world functions and how much we've all grown from the pandemic, where sometimes you do make the choice with 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3, and life continues and we still move on and we still can make other decisions later that don't revolve, again, so much of that rigidity. So here I was trying to give like, here's a pathway to some freedom with a very rigid component that I'm realizing now is like, here's just another piece of a puzzle, right?
Oh, I am so rigid in making decisions.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Let's talk about, okay.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm a puddle jumper. Casey's a cliff jumper. And, it's all right.
Yeah. It's weird because, I've noticed so much change in myself as well. And I don't know how old you are, but I definitely noticed a big change from like 36 to now, or I just turned 40 in February. There's definitely been a lot of walls like taken down as far as the rigidness goes. And I just remember, it kind of makes me laugh because my grandparents were it was just a free for all, for the most part. They would just let me do whatever and it didn't really bother them. And they were just like, yeah, you want to play the organ and the piano at the same time? Sure. Here, let me get, whatever. And when I had my first kid, I was just so rigid in that way of like, oh my gosh, you're making a mess, you're being loud, like all these things.
Yeah.
And then with each kid, they're all 5 years apart. And the older that I got, the less rigid I have become. And just certain things that just don't matter, I just let go. I just don't. My kids wore their pajamas out yesterday when I took them out of the house. And one of them didn't even have shoes on, and I was just like, that's fine. Whatever. And I know I feel a lot better in my own body now as opposed to then. So I kind of wonder sometimes if you feel like all pent up inside when you're trying to make decisions about rigid type things.
I worry about future decisions more than anything.
Like what?
Like when we got a vehicle. Oh my gosh. Like I was sitting there like, you talk about like getting ready for a roller coaster ride. That's how I feel like about big life.
It's a car.
I know, but it's still in a commitment.
Yeah.
It's really not
so
that big
true.
of a deal, but it feels like a big deal in the moment.
Do you think that's linked to perfectionism? Or you think that's just like a combination of perfectionism and fear and neurotic?
I think that core part of fear is so there of like, there's a wrong decision here. Like, what if I pick the wrong car? What if the investment I'm making isn't going to pan out at the end? What if something happens? And that definitely comes from that anxiety, fear component and the perfectionism of like, if there's a right answer and I don't choose it, then what am I missing out on? What did I do wrong? And taking that internally. And that can be, really debilitating to sit with over time.
Yeah. I think I'm more impulsive. It's not that I don't think it through. I'm just like, yep, today, let's go. Today's the day. Why wait? Like, I don't. Why keep?
You look like that's stressing you out.
It does. It just gets her in it. Like, there's so many things I just make decisions on my own and don't even say anything because I'm like, it'll just send her over the edge. So I'm just going to figure it out. But I can only hold so much information in my brain at one time. Like there's only so much I can think about and worry about and, weigh good and bad. There's only so much for so long. And so I don't want something sitting in my brain that doesn't need to be in it. Let's just make the decision and keep going.
Yeah.
And I also look at it a little bit more. I think if someone like Kelsey had started a business from nothing and grew it and started another business and maybe had a few, I think your tolerance for stress and risk taking increases. And so if I were sitting back in the shoes that I was in 10 years ago, maybe it would stress me out. Like maybe it would get me really worked up. But I think I've kind of coached myself into looking at decisions in terms of risk and, what are the risks and weighing those risks and let's just make a decision. Now, I'm not talking about things that you don't need, but a vehicle for the whole family to fit in is a necessity. We have to make that choice,
We made it.
Yes.
I'm getting better about making decisions in the moment. I don't know. I just, it's a fear.
Yeah. I have had to learn a little bit too over this past year because of running a small group practice during the pandemic, where we weren't really sure what was going to happen with people's incomes or insurance payments or all of the different pieces. I felt the weight of all of my employees' mortgages, all of their childcare, all of everything on my shoulders of like, I've got to keep all of these people stable. And which means I've got to figure out all of these things that are kind of unfigure outable. I would be at home at the end of the day and my husband would look at me and be like, how you doing? And I'd be like, I don't know. I have no idea. Everything is on my shoulders right now. In the meanwhile, like I'm also processing the pandemic and hearing about people dying and going through all of the drama that everybody else is at the same time, right? So all of these like multiple processes happening. And one of the things that I learned during this part was like decision making when I am stressed is not fun for me. I very much like shut down and I'm a little puddle of nothing and I just don't even want to try. So learning how to communicate that to not only my partner, but up to my employees or to other people of like, do I have capacity to make this decision right now or not? And if it's something that needs to be made, then asking for help in how we make it, or being able to say like, I can't make a decision about dinner today. It's not going to happen. So feel free to make whatever decision you want. I will live with the consequences of my inaction here because I do not have capacity to decide another thing in my head. And that was a big shift.
I totally, 100%. How many times and I don't say it a lot, but there's just times where I'm like, I can't make any decisions right now. You will not like the decision I make right now. So I get it. I think it's just decision fatigue or something, like it's, yeah. So can you?
Yeah. And when you combine that with other things, right? Like I'm a people pleaser by nature. So part of my decision fatigue comes in of like, I'm trying to scan him to find out like, what was it that he wanted to eat tonight for dinner? And I'm trying to scan myself of like, what do I want to eat for dinner? And I've made 50,000 other decisions today. And there's a right answer here. And I don't have capacity to find the right answer to make you happy and me happy. Like it's just not going to happen. So I have to give up in that space. And I think that's a big thing to do for people who struggle with perfectionism is to give up on the possibility of a right answer and just be like, it's going to just be whatever it is out here.
Yeah, I'll say, I don't care. I'll eat anything. And when I say that, like I genuinely mean it. I would probably eat roadkill at that point. I
get used to it. I make the decision at that point.
Yeah, she does. See,
I've gotten better.
I'm helping you without you knowing it.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay, so tell us again the name of your book, where they can get it.
Yeah, so you can find my book at toomuchnotenoughbook.com. You can also find it through my other websites of Dr. Tara Sanderson and Dr. Sanderson and Associates.com. But feel free to buy it now if you'd like. But new revision, I'm hoping is going to be out by my birthday in September. I am working on all the revisions now. I'm loving the process of taking something that I've created and giving myself some grace throughout it. One of the things that happened when I wrote my book initially was I wanted it to be perfect the first time so I didn't have to rewrite it. So even this practice of rewriting it has been so beneficial for me to just be like, it was okay that I made these mistakes back here. And it's not that I'm now going to make this version perfect. I'm just making this version the next one. It's a revised edition. It's not a new book. It's not the perfect version of it. And there may be another revised edition down the line when I learn a little bit more about myself in the process. And I love that element of like, nope, this is going to be growing and ebbing and changing with me.
Nice. I love it.
Same girl, same.
Same girl, same.
Any final words?
I've had so much fun talking with you all today. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying our podcast and would like to hear more from us, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts so we can keep making great content.
Talk to you later, besties.